we discovered that Pacific Gas and Electric is operated by and large by Rothschild. Rothschild owns Weather Central and also has a large hand in weather modification globally. And I'm so sad to be here today because I have family members that lost homes. And I live in a county that I call home that is being literally overrun by a power that has not yet been discussed. And I'm horrified and sad to be here right now. Very sad. But the plan to burn up Northern California was real. It was your first early warning. And they were emails that were sent to other government officials that knew about this. And I would ask you, please, to watch the YouTube, listen to it, because the second plan of burning up Northern California hasn't yet happened, but it will. It will happen.
Yes, and I am, of course, am Deborah Taveras, and I do run the website stopthecrime.net, where you can find that plan to burn up Northern California as well. But the agenda here today by the perpetrators here in Northern California was to again discuss the community warning program, preparing for a more resilient county. Now, for many of you, I've reported on resilient cities. I would recommend that you go to the YouTube Kill Cities by Rothschild and Rockefeller to understand what resilient planning is all about in your town. This is happening here in Sonoma County, but it's an extension of UN Agenda 21 policies and all the policies in your cities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And they're talking about fire safety, utility infrastructure, impact on fire infrastructure, and a discussion. Now, I was able to speak for 2.5 minutes in the first session today. And I told them their first early warning sign was from the emails that Pacific Gas and Electric and PG&E sent 3 years ago, and that it had been out on the internet, and they didn't attend to this. There was no attention paid to this. It was too outlandish to have PG&E and Pacific Gas and Electric talk about the use of satellite lasers on Northern California. Specifically, they said Sebastopol, which is, of course, in Northern California. But there is a second plan on that discussion, the plan to burn up Northern California too, and I advise them that that has not yet happened, but it will. So I would urge everybody to listen to the entire 2-hour presentation. It covers 2 radio shows on the Jeff Rense Radio Network, of which I was affiliated with at the time. But today's meeting is diabolical.
Edwards Air Force Base, Mojave Desert, California, nearly 100 miles north of Los Angeles. This is home to virtually every significant experimental aircraft ever flown. Here, secreted away in a hangar, is a revolutionary aircraft. The Air Combat Command's USAF YAL-747. It's not the speed or how high it can fly that makes it so special. It's the cargo. The world's first airborne directed energy weapon. The airborne laser, also known as the ABL. Just mounting the ABL requires one of the most sophisticated and elaborate modifications in history. The entire nose section is removed and retrofitted, and the world's largest titanium plate is installed to hold the enormous turret-mounted laser in place. The ABL system is designed to find, track, and destroy an enemy target in the air and on the ground. It can loiter at 40,000 feet for 5 hours, refuel in midair, and destroy a target 60 miles away in less than a second.
So in the future, it will not be aircraft in a dogfight. It will be aircraft at a distance being brought down by laser beams.
The Airborne Laser Project was launched in 1996 at a cost of over $1.5 billion. The weapon is projected to be combat-ready by 2015. There's also the fear that it could trigger a super high-tech arms race. Today, with lasers installed in virtually everything we use, from computers to CD players to video game systems, how long until our enemies have access to cheap, high-powered laser weapons?
In the era of energy weapons, we're almost certainly going to see exactly the same kind of arms race that we've seen with nuclear weapons and with other kind of weapons before them. The fact is that if the United States develops powerful lasers, other nations will develop powerful lasers.
we're looking at the natural color fire view, right here. Coming off of this, going up and out, or coming in from this and going down and in. There is no doubt about it. You need to turn on your brightness. If you can't see it, you need to go over and look at the image yourself. We're going to go to a regional sector and look here. I do not know what the hell this is. Dude, this is just going from here up to Nevada. No, it's going beyond. It's fading out by at the time it gets up to Oregon. There is a beam of some kind showing up as a heat signature. Look at this thing. Look at that. I'm going to hit play. Hold on. I'm just going to hit the last 48 images. We don't need to look all night because we looked earlier. Okay, this is sunset. What the hell, man? It's going through the clouds. It's going through the clouds. Look, it's fading in and out with the clouds. Do you see that? Look at that. Guys, there is some kind of beam. What the hell is going on?
What do you think the military of the world has had capable that they haven't told you about? And to just go all the way back to Nikola Tesla's free energy, which frequency, energy, vibration, they've held the keys to the kingdom for a very long time. They're just executing and using the technology. But when you brought up temperatures, when iron and steel melts at 2,795 degrees, aluminum 1,236, the hottest fire that wildfire ever recorded was 1,742 degrees. And this came out of nowhere, 170 fires in 9 counties with dozens of cars slipped on their roofs, not just torch, but slipped on their roofs. Cardinal Newman ball field with laser-like precision, and then it crosses a 6-lane Highway 101 and torches 100,000 square foot Kmart, but leaves the eucalyptus trees and everything else alone. Same to McDonald's, but leaves the gas station alone right next door. Like they said, the most electric forest fire in history. What's going on? This new technology? No, it's old technology.
You have temperatures, record-breaking temperatures, record droughts. Then you've got something else at play. And that's exactly what the scientists have been predicting for a half a century. It is here now. California, folks, is America fast forward. What we're experiencing right here is coming to a community all across the United States of America unless we get our act together on climate change, unless we disabuse ourselves of all the BS that's being spewed by a very small group of people that have an ideological reason to advance the cause of a 19th century framework and solution. We're not going back to the 19th century. We're not apologists to that status quo. We believe in the fresh air of progress versus the stale air, emphasis, stale air, normalcy. And so that's California.
Okay, New Orleans, we have a hurricane warning that is in effect, so we got to be prepared for this storm. I'm talking about what's now Tropical Storm Sally, but it is forecast to become a hurricane in the next 24 hours. Now, as far as the track of the storm goes, it appears pretty likely at this point, although not a complete sure thing, that the center of the storm is going to be east of New Orleans proper. That's a good thing because usually the strongest wind and the highest surge is very close to the center of the storm. But this is a unique situation because it's a slow-moving storm, and what that allows the storm to do is throw more water up into the lakes and rivers. So in general, around the Lake Pontchartrain shoreline, that whole area, we're talking about a 4 to 6 foot storm surge. Some of the storm surge that'll be worse than that, on the order of 7 to 11 feet. We're talking St. Bernard, Orleans Parish, Plaquemines Parish, places like that. So that's where the absolute worst of it's going to be. Now, as far as the timing goes, it looks like the worst of the storm will be late on Tuesday, okay? So this is not only going to be some really strong wind, even if we're not directly in the center of it, it's also going to be some very heavy rain, even though the even heavier rain will be farther toward the east. And again, the storm surge is the number one thing that we're concerned about. This is the thing that kills the most people in tropical cyclones, so it's the thing that we have to pay the most attention to. Once this storm is out of here, and again, it's a pretty slow-moving storm, things will generally kind of dry out by the time we get to Thursday and Friday. So we've got some time that we're going to have to be dealing with this storm, and I know you guys all have your hurricane preps ready.
Let's get on to Mr. Fletcher. Another question on the in an interview with the Los Angeles Times on April 21st, you said that you told the Associated Press that the American government has created weather tampering techniques so that the New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans and to control the rest. Would you explain what you were trying to say?
Well, what I was trying to say is exactly what I said. There is weather control techniques. We have a complete package on that, which I did not bring, but I certainly will see to it that it is brought in for the record. Number one, the entire patents on the equipment. Number two, Senator Claiborne Pell's complete statement and story of his own that not only does it exist, but that we even utilize it as far back as the Vietnam War. You might want to touch base with Senator Pell.
I just want to repeat before I turn to
So yes, but we do have all that information.
You're saying the government has created weather tampering techniques so that the, quote, New World Order will be able to starve millions of Americans.
Worldwide.
Millions of Americans, and to control the rest.
Yes, sir, and that's my belief. As bizarre as that sounds, if somebody had told me that that equipment even existed 10 years ago, I would have thought they were nuts, sir. And at this point in time, we have all the documents to prove it. And if you think that 85 tornadoes takes place in the middle of our growing area by simultaneous accident, I'm sorry. With the equipment that's already set up internationally, and as bizarre as that is, it is proven and documented. We will supply you with those documents. As bizarre as that is, I would say that weather wars, and this is quoting actually Senator Claiborne Pell himself, that they are the greatest weapon ever created in the world, and that's the senator's own statement. So yes, I do stand on that.
Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. Thank you, Mr.
What if you could fire a laser at the sky and make it rain? Oh, that sounds more interesting. Dave Malkoff explains.
Just another stormy, wet afternoon in Central Florida. But what if you could pick up all this rain and move it where it's needed? Texas or California? What if a laser could start the rain?
So you can almost use it to set it off.
Matt Mills got into lasers as a kid.
It's just innately cool.
Now he's part of a team of scientists and military backers on the cutting edge of a new technology, making lasers powerful enough to reach up here into the sky where a thunderstorm is just about to start. In the near future, a push-button storm starter could be a real thing.
Just imagining this situation. If there was a rain cloud that was going to pass over an area of drought and not rain, you could theoretically induce the rain and get the rain where it's needed.
That storm starter isn't the laser beam itself, but rather a popping energy that comes off of much higher power beams than this one. The problem is those pops have always had trouble getting into the sky. Now Matt has discovered a way to get the laser to pop all the way in the clouds. In theory, that's what starts a storm. We created a cloud of our own behind Matt's lab. A few months ago, Matt's colleagues in Arizona got this working experimentally. The next step is to get it to work in the sky.
The particles in the air are rubbing together, forming static electricity, and the conditions are now right, and they just need to be triggered now.
Does this concern you that you may be messing with Mother Nature and doing something that you don't completely understand up here in the cloud?
I mean, I suppose that's always a danger, but we're not even near to the case where it could be dangerous yet, so not too much.
It's almost like an on-off switch for a thunderstorm.
That's the idea behind it.
Right here in the cloud.
Yep.
In Orlando, Dave Malkoff, The Weather Channel.
Absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. And it could change a lot of things, like these areas of drought that we're watching in the West, if it actually worked. All right, let's move on to sports.
That was amazing. I saw those lasers.
Directly, it could, because if you push the ionosphere out into space, then the stratosphere, just under the ionosphere, has to move to fill in that gap. When it moves, it could pull the jet stream with it, thus rerouting it hundreds of miles, changing the way water moves through our atmosphere.
At the bottom of the cloud chamber, Dr. Agnew has constructed an ELF wave transmitter, a miniature version of HARP.
We're only using 100 watts. It's perfectly safe.
When Dr. Agnew turns on the ELF wave transmitter and begins shooting ELF waves into the simulated cloud, the cloud begins to move up to the top of the chamber, taking the moisture with it.
If you get down low enough, you can actually see a clear layer above the antenna. It is actually pushing these water particles up, and that's exactly how HARP works. What we've done is we've not only pushed the cloud off of the HARP antenna, but as you can see, our cloud is almost completely gone inside. HARP does exactly the same thing. It ionizes the particles, pushes them out into space.
Good evening, I'm Rosa Corey. I'm the Executive Director of the Post Sustainability Institute. And I'm glad to be here tonight. It's an important night because we're drawing something out of the shadows. And it's important to talk about it. It's not a conspiracy theory, it's a conspiracy fact. This is Agenda 21. This is the United Nations plan. It's a 300-page, 40-chapter plan. And ICLEI was created in 1990 prior to this plan's adoption to implement United Nations Agenda 21, Sustainable Development worldwide. Sustainable development is a term that was defined by the United Nations, and all of these terms come out of the United Nations. Smart growth is part of the United Nations Agenda 21. Your general plan elements are designed in accordance with United Nations Agenda 21 principles. The plan restricts your choices, it limits your ability to govern yourself, and it takes away your freedom. This seems like a rhetorical statement, but it really is not. This is actually what this plan does. And using the cover of environmental concern, our private property rights and our civil rights have been diminished, and they will continue to be so unless we call a halt to it. ICLEI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiatives, but it changed its name so that you wouldn't know that it's international. It seems like all of these things seem like they sound so good. Sustainable development, green, vibrant, walkable, bikeable. You know, how could you be against that? But really, when you know about this plan, it is really very serious.
Did you know that there's regional plans all across the nation right now that are being rolled out that are all exactly the same? They're all in alignment with the principles of UN Agenda 21. And ICLEI is their agent. An NGO is an affiliate of the United Nations. That's what that means. They're not part of this government. They're outside, coming from outside of our nation. And they don't have the best interests of Americans at heart.
What they're going for is 11 regions in North America, not states, not our 50 states, 11 regions. They will be appointing people to do the planning and the running and the operation of those regions through the United Nations.
The International Council of Local Environments is an oxymoron to me. What does the International Council have to do with our local environments?
On the ICLEI website, it says 200 local governments from 43 countries convened at our inaugural conference, the World Congress of Local Governments for Sustainable Future at the United Nations in New York. I think there's a connection. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Mora?
I am patently against ICLEI and Agenda 21, and I urge the city, as a resident, to withdraw your membership. That's not to say give up your green programs. That's not to say give up striving to have a better environment. But disconnect from this organization. It is not good, folks.
This isn't about green. Green is just the guise. Green is just the guise until we open our eyes and realize that control is how the people that you're working for really roll.
Here is the Local Agenda Planning Guide, ICLEI. Local Agenda Planning Guide, ICLEI. If you open this up, it's from Maurice Strong. It talks about the United Nations. It talks about Agenda 21. This is it. You cannot deny that they are not connected.
Neither the United States Congress nor the American people have voted for Agenda 21's implementation.
They are there to indoctrinate people on the local level and bring it up through the state until it's a reality. And these people are all here tonight because they sense the same jeopardy. I hope that you understand this is bigger than all your tree questions and your trash disposal or anything else.
Former President of the United States, George Bush Sr. said, effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both governments and individuals, and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. Dixie Ray, former Washington State Governor and Assistant Secretary for Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs, stated, Agenda 21 seeks to establish a mechanism for transferring the wealth from citizens to the third world. Fear of environmental crisis would be used to create a world government and UN central direction. This segment of our society, who fear one world government and UN invasion, through which our individual freedoms will be stripped away, would actively work to defeat any elected official who joined the conspiracy by undertaking Agenda 21. So we will call our process something else. We will call it comprehensive planning or growth management or smart growth. We ended up with sustainable development.
Sustainable development has become the popularized expression for Agenda 21. Agenda 21 is the 1992 United Nations Rio Declaration on the Environment and Development.
It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
Agenda 21 defines itself as the comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations systems.
It also elevates nature above man. And it contains something called the precautionary principle, where basically you're guilty until you're proven innocent.
Sustainable development is the philosophy designed to bring human beings across the globe under the full control of a narrow human elite.
It's a 40-chapter document to basically control the world. It's based entirely on socialist control mechanisms.
Sustainable developers have designed a global movement coordinated through a global to local action plan to create world government in accordance with certain objectives. The focus of sustainable development is the abolition of private property, societal undermining of the family, and abandonment of the constitutional protection of unalienable rights as described in the Declaration of Independence.
Well,
I went to these committees at the request of some people who told me that I needed to understand what was going on, and I came back and I said, this is craziness. This is so silly. It has no chance of having any effect on our society. Well, I was wrong.
The United States government's support for Sustainable Development, Agenda 21, is very clear. In 1992, while the Rio Conference was going on, George Bush, then president, was there where he executed the Agenda 21 protocols on behalf of the United States and brought it back to Washington, D.C. Within a year, Bill Clinton, by executive order, no congressional review, established the President's Council for Sustainable Development. In Santa Cruz, we've got a 2-lane freeway system. We need 4, but what we're getting is hundreds of millions of dollars of federal money to take a dilapidated rail line that Southern Pacific wants to put in the hands of somebody else so that a commuter line can be built along the railroad track. That'll be followed by 14-story buildings where people will live and stack them and pack them units, where developers or so-called sustainable developers will build these high-rises with federal dollars. It's a partnership between selected developers building this new world order and the government using the American taxpayer dollars in order to do it. This is a map of the Wildlands Project. To explain the map, the red are areas that are to be off limits to human beings. No resource development, no human activity. If you live there, you won't.
Coming up, if you don't live in a major metro area, you might want to pack your bags. Years ago, moving to the suburbs was a sign that you were making a better life for yourself and your family. But our next guest details a government report suggesting there may be a long-term plan to change all that for you. The effort to, quote, Manhattanize America. If you live in the suburbs, don't get too comfy. Our next guest says the Obama administration has plans to push Americans slowly but surely out of the burbs and into the big cities as a means to, quote, spread the wealth around.
The yellow areas are the areas for major control of all human activity. If you live there, you won't. The black areas, the black dots, are the smart growth zones. That's where human beings are to be stacked and packed in small living units along rail tracks.
Notice, the barbed wire faces in, not out. All right, we're going to go ahead and get out here. Take a look at this a little closer. Stick with me. Okay. And these buildings are pretty massive. They could hold a whole lot. Basically, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down there. There's another one over there and one in front of that. So there's 6 big buildings. And then you notice each of the doors are numbered. W01, W02, W03, warehouse being able to E-211. And again, if we get a closer look at the barbed wire here. You can see the railroad tracks that go on the sides of all the buildings.
And it's pretty much been covered by a lot of people. You see the sign out there, hopefully, that says Homeland Security for the T. Don Hutto Residential Center. And so there it is. It's been designated as a FEMA camp in time of civil unrest or declared emergency.
A stockpile of military vehicles were recently discovered occupying a secluded commercial property on the outskirts of Las Vegas, at the address of 5750 Sky Point Drive. It doesn't seem as if the Humvees and other military-grade vehicles are for sale, even though they are stationed at a former car dealership that has been stripped of its business logo and signs. It would appear as if the equipment is deliberately being hidden from the public on this secluded property surrounded by barbed wire fences. The front of the building, which can be seen while driving north on Interstate 95 while departing from Vegas, is littered with pedestrian vehicles. After closer investigation, it was clear that the former United Dodge dealership is some sort of military station, judging from the soldiers on the property all dressed and outfitted in army fatigues. However, there is no clear indication or signage posted certifying that it is a United States military base. One 18-year-old boy named Jonathan, who lives in the area, proclaimed the military has been there for 6 months now. His friends added, "We think it's a secret undercover operation or military base."
Charlotte Iserby, I owe you an apology. I did not believe for the longest time it was a deliberate dumbing down. I thought the dumbing down was a natural consequence of a bad idea. Folks, it's deliberate. It's deliberate.
The sustainable globalist goal is the orchestration of a planned fall of American principles, values, and lifestyles. The effect on the average American will be devastating. With modernizing technology, the ordinary person will live without independence, privacy, or substantive rights.
This government has been working overtime to take away our rights to common law through many pieces of legislation. Common law is what guarantees us an ability to correct injustices. This coming year, I promise you, you will also hear debate over a number of pieces of legislation that will further erode our common law rights. And you have to get behind me on this, ladies and gentlemen, to stop this from going through. As Agenda 21 became more and more apparent to me, I began using the line in Parliament that government was now declaring war on its own citizens. And that goes back as far as 2008. This, of course, led me to being labelled a conspiracy theorist. But here we are now, openly talking about Agenda 21 and the ramifications we will see in a short period of time if this is not stopped in its tracks. The environmental crisis will be the international disaster that will unlock the new world order, one world government.